Hi, my name is Trevor Deering, I'm a Product Marketing Director at Illumio. And what I want to be able to show you now is, in a bit more depth, exactly how to use the Illumio core to understand what's happening within your environment, and also to build policy and rules for segmentation purposes. So what we're looking at here is the very top level view. So what we're looking at, what we can see are basically a number of processing centers. So we see California, we see New York, we see an AWS environment, we see Azure, Sydney, London. And what we can then do is to click down and look at each of the individual locations. So we look into California and we can see that there are actually 10 applications and various things, groups running, ranging from IoT devices through to point of sale and PCI type information. And so what we can actually do then is to look in a bit more depth at some of these environments. So if we were to potentially pick on one thing, which is a point of sale application, staging application, we can see that it exists here within this environment. Where we see red lines are basically where rules haven't been defined, so everything is blocked. And we can also see how it communicates with environments in other computing, other data centers. So what we see here is communication with Sydney, with London, and other processes within California. What we can basically do now is we can actually look down on the individual workloads. So we can see this individual workload here, POS, processing, MV. And we can see here that it's part of the point of sale staging group. Its role is processing. We can see the services it's using, the state of the policy, which is build, which means that rules have been created but not enforced. So you can actually use this for monitoring, and we can actually then dive down in a bit more detail into the workload and see the operating system that it's running, how long it's been running for, how much traffic has flowed. And also things like what processes are running, whether there's been any sort of block traffic in this environment. So we can see potentially block traffic that, if the rule was enforced, that we would then be blocking. So you can see that we can draw a huge amount of information from each of the workloads and from each of those links. So let's go back to the map and look at what we're seeing. And effectively, as you said, we're seeing communication here between various locations within that same application. So we see over here again, if we click here, that we're seeing still the point of sale application or the same application in London, and we can see how those links all communicate with each other. But ultimately, we could instead look at this from an application owner's perspective. So instead of looking at those locations, we could just look at the point of sale application. And what we're seeing here is all of the processes in the point of sale PCI application, regardless of where they actually exist. So we're just looking at this from the view as though you were the application owner. And we can see all that same information. We can look at the links between the different processes. We'll apply some rules in a moment, so we'll see how to do that. But fundamentally, what we can do is see all of that communication. Now, if we actually wanted to look in a bit more depth to understand what is going on there, we have a tool here which we call Explorer. And what Explorer is showing us is basically some details on all of those communications. So we can see what's allowed. So we can see, the labels of the provider applications. We can see what ports they're using. We can see when they've been used. We can see the flows. And if we scroll down, we can actually see where there's been blocked communication. So what there is here is a camera that's been trying to communicate with the application, and we've actually been able to block that. And then also down here we can see where that's happened again, where different services are allowed to be able to get that sort of information. So again, let's go back to the top level map here, and what we're seeing here is information about the actual policies that are being enforced within this environment. Now we can look at this slightly differently, because instead of looking at policy data, we can look at vulnerability data. So this is information and data that we've imported from tools like Tenable or Qualys or Rapid7 that show us the vulnerabilities of each of these workloads. And what we then do is we then add that basically to a score that shows their exposure because of the number of communications and what the actual rules are. So if we see here, this one here has a score of 45, and we can see what the 7 vulnerabilities are that make up that score. And so it may have a reasonably high vulnerability score, but because it's communicating with lots of other devices, then the actual vulnerability that we're seeing is actually potentially could be much worse. So you can sort of see that not only are we let's go back to the policy data. What we can see is not only the information about flows between workloads, what's blocked, how long it's been going, how much data has been transferred, but we can actually also see what's happening from a vulnerability perspective, so that we can, all of this allows us to then make decisions about enforcing policy. So let's actually do that now. Let's enforce some policy. So let's get back to our sort of top view, and maybe let's do it simply. Let's pick on London, and we can see a number of applications. Again, our ordering production application that we have here. And we can see that within that environment there is a number of links that we're seeing that are all marked in red. And actually, what we want to do is to allow some of this communication. So we can easily we can pick on this. We can pick on this line here, which is the communication between the web and the processing, and we can add a rule. And that rule allows basically the workloads to communicate with that server. And we can choose here, we can actually turn on and turn off IPsec encryption. So it allows us to have that level of control. And then fundamentally, when we save that rule gets applied, and we can start to see that those links then turn green. So it is that simple to apply a rule. You haven't got to sit down and create 100 firewall rules and put them all in the right order to be able to create that sort of environment. So fundamentally what we've done here is an application ring fence. The other way to be able to do this, if we maybe go back to our California data center, is we have another tool here called Policy Generator. And so if we again look at our point of sale staging application here, what we can do is we can then automatically create those intrascope rules. So, and we can do that either as an application ring fence, or we could do the next level down and do environmental separation. So separate web from application from database. And what we see are all of the rules here. Or we can go down to individual specified services. So it gives you much better control over these environments, and it provides you with all these suggested rules that you can either include or exclude. So again, no worrying about order, no worrying about where they go or anything like this. So it gives us that level of control. And then from a vulnerability perspective, we can set a level so that we effectively mitigate against these vulnerabilities. So we can mitigate against pretty much all the vulnerabilities. We can go to medium, we can go to high, we can go to critical, which is pretty much just this one with the 45 exposed vulnerabilities, and we can apply a rule that actually protects that device from attack. And again, we can fundamentally go down to different levels. So hopefully what I've really shown you here is the capability to be able to see and gather a huge amount of information, to be able to use that information and to be able to not only see the broad information, the top level information about what's going on, but to get down to a lot of detail that helps you then to design and develop policy, which then is very easy to to enforce. So basically, click on a link and create a policy. And what you can then do is to run in what we call build mode, which allows you to see what would happen if. So it's not a case of build a policy, hit the button and hope it doesn't break. You get the option to do that, and actually you can then, and from that you can generate alerts to a sim system or anything like that, as though it was real life, so you can see exactly what's going on. And then fundamentally, as we said, when we hit the button, we can enforce that policy, and convergence happens really quick. So regardless of whether you have 10 workloads or 150,000 workloads, it all works the same. It all is very, very scalable. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Obviously, if you have any questions, please visit the Illumio website, and I wish you all a good day.